Hi, it's Lynn Pratt. Thanks so much for joining me in this super quick tutorial to paint this Peapod. I start with sap green on dry paper on the outside of one pea and do the inside with leaf green, blending, making sure to leave a white highlight. I then skip over to my next pea inside my Peapod, making sure to skip one so my edges have a little bit of time to dry so they don't blend into the next pea. Once I know that my edges are dry enough, I'll skip and do the two other peas as well. But you need to make sure that your edge is dry before you go right up against the pea that you've just painted. Again, just using sap green on the outside and leaf green on the interior, making sure to leave that white highlight. I also use a little bit of burnt sienna and ultramarine light mixed together to form the shadow on the base and in between the peas. I mix this gray color with my green to make that darker green color to add the shadows. As I add in these shadows on the base and in between the peas, I make sure to blend the edges with a dry brush so it has that nice round feeling to it. For the outside of the Peapod, I'm using leaf green for the brighter areas and adding my sap green right into it. I also have a mixture of burnt sienna and sap green that gives a little bit more of a darker green color that I'm going to use in the shadowed bottom area. I'm also using my burnt sienna and ultramarine light mixture towards the bottom to really give it that three-dimensional feeling. I'm doing the same on the top of the Peapod, but since the light is hitting there, I'm going a lot lighter on that side and using mostly leaf green and sap green. I'm using the same mixture of these 4 different colors that I've used on the rest to paint in the leaves, just making sure that I keep my highlights and my shadowed areas and keep in mind which direction my light is coming from in this photo, which is the top left-hand side. So I want to make sure that everything is shaded accordingly so it all makes sense when you look at it as a whole. Now it's time to put the darker area in the inside of my Peapod. I'm starting with a base of sap green and adding into it my mixture of sap green and burnt sienna and also my mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine light to darken that area. Essentially, I'll do one wash of color, wait for it to dry, and then do another wash over it if I need to darken any areas. I'm mixing all of these colors right in my paper. So I have mixtures on my palette, but I'm adding all these colors right to my paper and letting them mix right there. Now I'm just adding a few of those darker areas to the stem and leaves to make them seem a little bit more realistic. Now it's time to put my shadow in. I've mixed up my ultramarine light and burnt sienna on my palette and have it ready to go. I then use clean water to wet the area under my Peapod, larger than I'm going to add the shadow. I want this to be evenly wet with no areas of puddles or anything like that, so when I add my color to it, it spreads slightly and adds a nice blurred edge, but doesn't blend all over the place. So again, I've wet my paper further out than my shadow actually goes so that the edges blend smoothly. I'll then take a basically dry brush and just touch up the edges of my shadow to make sure that they're not blurred too much. Once everything is dry, I can go in and touch up any areas that need to be, but I want to make sure that I don't disturb the initial wash so that it doesn't mess that up. I'm also going to add any more shadows that I need, darker areas that I'm going to need to my painting to really make it pop off the page and seem very three-dimensional. Now I'm just going to go back with my lifting brush and clean water and lift out some of the highlights on the Peapod. A lot of people skip this last step, and I really think it's the thing that will make or break your painting. Adding these extra little highlights in that you may have taken out by accident really make a huge difference. So make sure you look over your painting in the end and take out any extra highlights that you need to. Thanks so much for joining me in this watercolor tutorial on how to paint a Peapod. I hope you join me in some of my other things. Check out my YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook page for many more videos. Thanks so much. Let's paint.